It should be live. Day 12, I believe, stream 12 of the war in Ukraine. Got flight radar 24 up down here in the 3D view. This plane coming from Germany to that Air Force base in the east of Poland. Got live UA map up as well that has been updated. And we've got the webcam up as well with some in the background. Welcome everyone, welcome G, Katie, Riff and Dip, Cesar, Emirates, Brabant, Jay, Vlatka, Pollock, Alex, welcome along everyone, welcome Scott. As we spoke about yesterday, I changed the name of the stream or did a thumbnail. So we'll see how it feels. If it doesn't feel right, can always go back to how it was. And just been a tweet from the president of Ukraine. It's quite interesting. Bear with me, I'll just get it up. This might be quite loud.
Вечірній Київ. Наш офіс. Понеділок, вечір. Ви знаєте, ми звикли говорити понеділок день важкий. В країні війна, тож кожен день понеділок.
It's quite an intro, isn't it? It seems incredibly brave, and I imagine it incredibly inspiring if you're also in Kyiv to see your president taking a video out of the window, and then the way it segues into the actual press conference. You can see him taking the video here.
Вечірній Київ. Наш офіс. Понеділок, вечір. Ви знаєте, ми звикли говорити понеділок день важкий. В країні війна, тож кожен день понеділок.
So I think that, I believe that has just come out. Techno, I like the thumbnail. I like the thumbnail. I like you moved away from the red, yellow, blue to not keep aside. Yeah, I was a bit worried that green was the color of Russia today. But I was just trying to go for a kind of classic, that's the right word, neutral. Slow, is that to show he isn't scared of people knowing where he is? I believe so. That, you know, there's been a lot of transparency in terms of he's been interviewed by journalists there. That very powerful video the day after, or the night after the first bombings, I believe, in Kyiv, where he said, "I'm here, everyone in the cabinet is here." Thanks, Emirates 234 for the £1. Thank you very much. Welcome Train Spotting. Let us know which plane that is. Welcome Rebel Line as well. Good to see you. Good to see you again, Ethan, Cara, Sean, Brad, Andy, MBR, Debt Poker Club, Scott. Yeah, good to see a lot of familiar faces. Everyone well. Day 12. Hopefully the sound is good. Day 12, and again, really conflicting reports on how the invasion is going. The latest figures from Ukraine today were over 11,000 Russian troops killed, which is a astonishing number by inverted commas Western standards of invasions. You can see here live UA map has updated itself, and it's kind of I imagine it's very difficult to establish what is under control. There may be areas that are under no one's control, i.e. we not safe for either side to progress. But you can see the route along this road, just how important the roads are in northern Ukraine. Thanks, Emirates, for £2. It's Putin crazy? It's certainly been difficult to work out the logic and the rationale of the invasion now, given that, you know, Russia's going to be putting a number of next generation weaponry online in the next couple of years. Planes, fighter jet, drones. Sorry, planes, tanks, drones. So the reason to attack now seems unusual. Okay, thanks, train spotting. Welcome back, Joe. Good to see you. Yeah, again, there was talks of a humanitarian corridor today in Mariupol that didn't look like it lasted. There was obviously the very shocking footage yesterday that was widely shared. We can only speculate, but it seems that perhaps the Russian army thought that they would capture these cities much easier. They would be welcomed in. I believe the only major city that has kind of inverted commas fallen is Kherson, but I may be wrong. Thanks, Emirates234 for the £1. Let me know if you had a comment. That didn't come with a comment. Welcome, Chili Billy. Hello again. All before I start, have a conversation laptop to all you people from the world who I never met before. I'm not here to offend. I'm here to get to the bottom of the truth. Ocean Chief, I'm 100% against unnecessary wars, but I can't help feel the West need to confront Putin head on now, or they risk prolonging the inevitable. Enjoying the streams, by the way. Peace. I think today there's been the first sense of countries kind of saying where the line is in terms of sanctions. So about Russian imports, it was Germany and another country I can't remember saying, look, there can't be maybe the Netherlands, there can't be restrictions on Russian imports because Europe is still too reliant on Russian gas to cut itself off. If that is the destination, we are seeing the approach here, which is pretty cool. Looks like we're seeing the approach. C-17. Not too far over on the horizon there is Ukraine. Don't feel like you need to donate £200, Emirates234. Unless you want to donate to, because this channel doesn't make a profit. Every donation I get, an advert goes back into this channel, equipment, etc. Don't take any profit from it. So unless you want to support this channel, maybe better off going as a donation to a worthier cause. Will the landing gear come down? I don't know actually in this 3D view. Obviously it's just a representation based on the tracker. Welcome back, Jolanda. Nice host and chief. Dylan, I think the terms which Russia offered as big news for today are those terms. They're essentially the terms that we've been speaking about for 12 days, right? In terms of recognition of Crimea and Donbass, and a commitment to not join NATO. Were those the terms essentially? And inverted commas demilitarization. Let me know. I think they were the terms that were spoken about today. They almost don't. If they are, they don't feel like a surprise because we've been saying for a long time they would be the likely terms. Sorry, chat. I'm just trying to hold it. I can't hold it, so it's a bit jarring. Ooh. I think we'll call it a successful landing. Yeah, he's decided to go for the old no gear landing there. Welcome, Siren. Welcome, Phage. Rebel, the terms to not join a bloc, which to me also included joining the EU. In a way that's... yeah, a little bit further, but not that much further. Stephen Mayhew, I thought the term said neutrality and demilitarization, but I could be wrong. I thought it was along those lines. And it's something that we talked about at a very high level, but is it possible for Ukraine realistically to not be neutral? Is it just realistically in between two huge blocks, if you want to look at it like that. So Russia and the EU/NATO. Is it inevitably in between two of these? And the more it looks to Russia, the more pressure there will be from the West. And the more it looks to the West, the more pressure there will be from Russia. Is that inevitable? Welcome, see. Dylan, they are not surprising themselves, but offering these terms 12 days into conflict, which we know they thought would be 1 in 15 is pretty telling. Fair point. Mr. Elisu says plane of the American Air Force in southern Portugal and plane of the Italian Air Force in Romania. Let's have a look at the Italian Air Force plane then. If you have a what was that no call sign? Oh, here we go. This is the Italian Air Force. I'm not sure if a 767 is a tanker. Actually, I have no idea. It looks to be circling in Romania. Brad split Ukraine in half. It's interesting that that is not on their demands. Although you could say to some extent in terms of the recognition of Donbass, or the Donbass region. No worries, Mr. LSU. Stephen, I think if they are neutral and demilitarized, they feel they will become an extension of the Russian Federation. That is true. What does demilitarization mean, and how do you demilitarize a country that has had a massive influx of weapons? But is this the first sign of a potential de-escalatory path from Russia? Can Russia be trusted on that? Welcome, Josh. Spuddy, if Russia was to make its move to other EU states, I don't think it would because of NATO. I really don't think the momentum is with Russia here to go beyond Ukraine. If Ukraine had fallen within days, and actually the Ukrainian population had been more sympathetic to Russia, and the Ukrainian government had fled, and Russia was occupying Ukraine in a similar timescale to the Taliban retaking Afghanistan, then maybe that would add some legitimacy to any other arguments they might want to put about ex-Soviet states. But I really don't think that is the momentum right now. You know, day 1, day 2, day 3 of these streams, I was always saying it's very early. But as the weeks pass, because we're only a couple of days off 2 weeks, that may change. Helena, I think Russia will not survive its internal turmoil to keep up any momentum. Phage, I'd like your take on what happens next. What's the next step here? What do you reckon this means for the geopolitical landscape? This massive and cold dynamics. I think for any state that is not in a bloc like NATO, a collective defense pact, I think it shows the realistic importance of having nuclear weapons. So we may see more countries try and move towards either having nuclear weapons or hosting nuclear weapons. Seems like Japan is not now averse to hosting nuclear weapons. Other than that, I think it's a bit early to say. If Russia succeeds here with what it wants to achieve militarily, and NATO has basically said it will tolerate this, i.e. what is going on isn't so offensive to NATO's values that NATO countries will directly assist militarily, then that does embolden other countries. That the current rules-based order in terms of the United Nations being there to respect and reinforce sovereignty of nations is somewhat weakened. If Russia is really, inverted commas, not successful, I don't know what that means for independence movements in Russia, for example. I don't know what the end state is for Russia not being successful. How does Putin react? Does he stay in power? What's the succession plan? So I don't know. I feel a bit more confident though that it's, and we spoke about this yesterday, that I really think the chances of this escalating to World War III is very low, although it's a bit higher than it was more than 2 weeks ago. But I do still feel like the chances of this escalating now are slim. It looks like Russia has its hands full in Ukraine. And Bear, I really thank you for these daily streams. Your calming voice and your level-headedness has helped me calm down after some anxious days in the past week. That's very nice to hear. There's one thing, I'm not an expert on anything, but if there's one thing that these streams can do, hopefully, is to be reassuring and comforting. So that means a lot, Ambera. Josh H. Russia cannot be trusted, and honestly, neither can NATO. This whole war is based on previous promises and agreements based side to side. Yeah, is there just a sense that is there some kind of dissonance between citizens of states not really wanting war, and yet seem to be like magnetized towards starting? Yeah, I read about Japan announcing some occupation of Russia. I've got to be honest. I don't know what they are. I can only assume they're up here. I don't know too much about that. It seemed like a very significant thing to say, but I haven't really seen any reporting on it. So that might just be because of the extraordinary times that we're in right now. Dylan, who knows what the real situation is like yet? So when Russia, with this invasion, pushed Ukraine into submitting NATO application, I think Russia would say that, oh, see, Ukraine were really planning to apply. I think Ukraine applied to join the EU and not formally NATO. But Russia could say, oh, look, they were always applying to join the EU. See, we found out their plans, I guess. Everyone seems to forget the Budapest Memorandum. Yeah, so the Budapest Memorandum surely has been violated by Russia. So, buddy, what plane are we watching? This is an Italian tanker over Romania. We can go to the map if we want. If anyone's got any planes that wow, look at this flight plan. Where is this plane going to? Is it going to Istanbul? That is an insane flight plan. See if we can see any Eurofighters up in the air. Speak of the devil. Taking off from Jordan, seems. I think there were some B-52s today in the air, so if anyone does spot any B-52s, please do let us know. Helena, but what harm is there for Russia if Ukraine's in the EU? Maybe if you're if you're in the EU, it's easier to join NATO. I don't know. You've already acceded to a bloc like that. I think the fear that I can see is most rational is if Ukraine is in NATO or was in NATO, then US troops and the most advanced NATO weaponry and missiles could be here. You know, and then the concept of there being intercontinental ballistic missiles are just redundant. And because you're here, you're very close. Very, very close. So we spoke, one of the polls yesterday about whether this Ukraine joining NATO would be the Cuban Missile Crisis of for Russia, and I can see that, actually. It's definitely something that wasn't really on my radar. I wasn't really thinking about NATO eastward expansion. The issue seemed to be sort of settled, but now it's a bit more apparent that, okay. A nice train spotting. Let us know if we get a registration. Spartan, what if USA used a drone to attack convoy and say it's Ukraine? How would Russia know it's USA? If the drone is shot down and they recover it and they can see that it's a US drone, it's just kind of not worth risking. To what extent? I think the one of the big developments today was again about the F-16s, and the US has given the green light to that to happen. Maybe Poland now is going to be more willing to provide them. Maybe Poland is concerned about being dragged into the war. Not dragged into the war, that's wrong, but being standing out as the country that is really blurring the lines the most by providing fighter jets. Steve, I'm not so sure acceptance of NATO. Yeah, that's fair enough. I'm not so sure about suddenly, but I believe there are missiles in Poland. I may be wrong. I believe there are missiles in Poland, so you can see that over time. Welcome, Judy. Helena, the problem with any weapons is that we see that mutual destruction in the end makes any war points on large scale, so we should trade. Depends if you believe a conventional world war is possible, notwithstanding that there's nuclear weapons. Actually, what's Israel's position? I think Israel is trying to mediate some kind of negotiation. We've seen, I don't know if anyone knows this, if the business jets from Moscow are still going, I think, to Israel. Welcome, Lee. Joe on TV News said they said Putin is hiring Syrian soldiers to fight. Yeah, I saw that. I don't know how true that is. It seems kind of impractical, language barrier, etc. But I don't know. Jan, and Moldova. Moldova is a very interesting question because Moldova is not in NATO. I wasn't too sure about Moldova's position, but a few days ago they applied to join the European Union, so they've really set out their stall. There is this kind of disputed region on the east here. I think there might even be Russian bases in there. But if I was... the question of... Actually, I probably have missed this quite a few times. But the question of where will Russia go next, if you had to ask me as a non-expert, I would say, well, the most at-risk country is Moldova. Jeff, the West cannot sanction Russian oil and gas. They certainly won't escalate with sending forces. I think there's definitely a change, and I've heard about people talking about a green Manhattan project and a genuine move and push now to de-rely on Russian gas. Notwithstanding, Nord Stream 1 and the pipelines which go through Poland and Ukraine. I think up to oil fields around here. Yeah, I don't see Finland as in any way likely. But again, I may be wrong. Military base here. Satellite imagery is a bit crazy, isn't it? I think this is where there was a Russian submarine disaster, tragedy. Nuclear power plants. I don't know if anyone has really worked out where those CCTV cameras were on this map. I'll leave it up here. Dylan, I see an interesting take that this may be the last attempt at conventional warfare. It's gone so badly for Russia and the information war will still be won by Ukraine that maybe it is that way. And Bear, I don't see Putin attacking another country, but if it is, it's either Moldova, one of the Baltic states, probably Estonia. It would be a very bold move to attack one of the Baltic states. That would be a real testing question of NATO. That's sort of like an endgame move. Fighter Smurf says, truth is the first victim of any war. Definitely information is a weapon in this war. Jedi says the war is going fine for Russia. They will win logistically. Joaquin, the CCTV camera was directly in front of the main road towards the back building. Let me leave it up here. Do you... Because I remember there was a car park. I didn't, Patricia. Got lots of questions there, Chili. I don't have the answer to them. Thanks, train spotting. Atta says Georgia or Moldova. Yeah, I mean, actually, maybe Georgia is potentially more likely. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe Russia really wants to secure its borders. CM says Odessa right now. Do you mean the next likely target? Working on the lower left right of your screen is one of those GRU buildings. Lower left of your screen. Lone Wanderer, I haven't seen much reporting from the front lines. I'm also not sure if I believe that 11,000 Russian troops have died thus far, but it's possible. I agree. You'd imagine those numbers from Ukraine are inflated. I haven't seen any numbers from Russia for a while. So you mean the cameras when they hit the administrator's building a few days ago? Probably near the MPP mark point, because there you see the car park. Does seem extraordinary. It's also where the land ends. You can imagine if a front was coming up, the land ends here. There is nowhere for any kind of retreating Ukrainian forces to go. So it's a pretty, just very surreal and, but in some ways probably foreseeable situation to people who know the significance of the nuclear reactors in Ukraine. Again, I wonder if that's another way. So people ask about a no-fly zone or NATO inverted commas boots on the ground. And my view has been that that window closed once the invasion started. There was a window before then. I wonder if NATO could have said, "Okay, we're going to station troops at the nuclear bases only to secure them at Ukraine's request." I don't know. So in Russia saying 490 dead, 1,500 wounded. Ukraine saying 11,000, so true number 17. You would imagine that, yeah. You would imagine that. Dr. Bitcoin says US Air Force plane in southern Spain near Gibraltar. Let us know if you have a call sign. Can't see Forte 12 in the air today. Jedi Steve, I respect your opinion. Welcome, Brian. Bean, for me, I don't know what you're talking about. World War 5 there, so Rebel, I've been reading a book on Russian military doctrine, and the war seems to be very typical by Russia. Soviet method of encircling cities, albeit a larger operation than anything since Afghanistan. Maybe, and you know that has, you could say, worked in Kherson. Looks like the next major strategic objectives for Russia probably would be to surround Odessa, link up, make sure they have a land bridge to Crimea, link up their northern and southern fronts, which looks to be happening, and encircle Kyiv, I would imagine, but I don't know. Iridic says RAF Globemaster over Dresden. Ah, yes, exactly. From Bryce Norton, I imagine going to this Polish airport. Good spot. See if we see any other unusual flight plans today. Rebel also sending in young conscripts and old machinery in the first instance, also typical. Unlike the West, Russia accepts high casualties. MBR, very typical military strategy, even if unexpected. Stephen, I don't think Russia expected the hits to the supply lines at all. Says, what are those red lines near Moldova? I understand that it's a kind of disputed region. That is that supports Russia and is supported by Russia. I don't know too much more about it, I'm afraid. Mark, they just need to connect the dots. Phage, the thing is, if this is what Russia's doctrine is, they are a lot less prepared for conventional contemporary warfare than we even thought. New warfare is entirely unlike the 1890s. Yeah, so if that is their doctrine from Afghanistan, kind of roll in armour and surround cities and use transport helicopters, because they're essentially using the same hardware that they were using in Afghanistan, really, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. That doesn't seem to add up in this age of manpads and javelins, etc. Transnistria. Okay. Merky, what do you think about possible war in Bosnia? I don't really know, I'm afraid. I don't really know. Blazing Grizzer, what is Russia? That's quite an existential question. If we could answer that, then I think we may understand more of Putin's motives. What is Russia? I don't know what happened in Dublin, Spuddy. Italian Lockheed spotted. Let's put that in. The plane that we haven't been able to track is a B-52. Or even a Russian Bear. Italian Air Forces looks to be having more of a presence. Welcome, Andrew. Do you think Putin's move with the evacuation pass sign is recognising his tactics commission but not working? I think there's a lot of cynicism about the humanitarian corridors because they lead back to Russia. Why would Ukrainian citizens being shelled want to go through a humanitarian corridor into Russia? And also because I think in every instance they've had to be abandoned because of shelling. So I think it's being met with a lot of cynicism. I don't know if anyone else has a different view. Alchemy says there's about 1,500 troops stationed in Transnistria. Helena says Russia is what happened after the Russian Empire kept on conquering lands more and more east, if I remember correctly. this led to the modern Russian state, but it conquered Uralic people, for instance. And Bera, just last week I talked to a guy from Transnistria and his view on the war in Ukraine is interesting. Let us know what that was, Ambera, if you want. Welcome, Dwight. I don't have any particular thoughts on China and Taiwan. Graham says Ukraine is known as a breadbasket of Europe due to the amount of wheat they grow. One of the many reasons for Putin to take Ukraine. Yeah, there just seems to be so many pretexts out there, and it's which was the most pressing one that it had to happen now? Josh, just curious, do you think if Poland and the US get aircraft to Ukraine, that will put Russia in addition to invasion? I did see an interview today with the previous president of Ukraine, Poroshenko, who is now leading some sort of territorial defense unit in Kyiv. It's quite extraordinary. I'm not sure how many of us live in countries where we could say that our president or leader would, in a situation like this, be on the ground leading a defense unit just in full, military fatigues. But he was very powerful that those planes are needed now. I think I saw figures showing that Ukraine's air force was something like 64 planes and Russia has 1,500 planes. I don't know to what extent that is fighter jets or supply planes, etc. But it shows you that if Russia really wanted to, surely it could overwhelm Ukraine's airfields and bomb all of them wherever it wanted, even taking into account the losses it would encounter doing that. But he was very passionate about how those fighter planes are needed right now to protect the skies. I can only imagine what's happened is there was a someone in the EU loosely got a agreement or an indication that these ex-Warsaw Pact countries would provide their Soviet fighter jets, MiG-29s, to Ukraine. Then that was announced, maybe a bit prematurely. Then to me it seems like basically all of these countries said, no, we're not going to do that. I don't know if because it's for national security reasons or it would be unpopular domestically, or because it would expose them as having gone further than the other country in directly supporting Ukraine, and therefore, really in Russia's bad books. I think Russia actually released a bad book today, as comically as it sounds. So what seems to happen yesterday is that the US has put in place some kind of export plan, maybe for every MiG-29 Poland provides to Ukraine, USA will provide an F-16. Something like that, I don't know. It's amazing that the government are fighting the people. Yeah, we'll put up this tweet again as well. So this was from a little bit earlier today.
Ось вечірній Київ. Наш офіс. Понеділок.
I think you can put a lot of stuff into words and inverted commas propaganda and posters or whatever, but just a very simple video like this, I imagine, really cuts through. This again is the Ukrainian president saying he's there, he hasn't fled, he's not afraid, and he's with Ukrainians, and therefore Ukrainians should listen to him. It's a very powerful message and a very simple message that just almost cuts through any counter propaganda to it in some way. I don't know if anyone feels the same.
Вечірній Київ. Наш офіс. Понеділок, вечір. Ви знаєте, ми звикли говорити понеділок день важкий. В країні війна, тож кожен день.
Given that he is, he is target number one. Fucking Chris. His propaganda also implies untruth, and he's actually there, he's actually saying he's actually leading. MBR words for now. Poland has said they won't transfer aircraft. the likelihood of having any worthwhile limited to. Yeah, it's just, I think what Poroshenko was saying is it is needed now. And it's not, there's no time for the usual stuff to happen behind the scenes and agreements and whatnot. It just needs, if it's going to be effective, it needs to happen now, was his view. Like literally every hour it doesn't happen, it's less important. Yeah, apparently he's going to talk to the UK Parliament. Welcome to Happy Meal. Jeff, you can tell he has an acting background. Yeah, possibly. Thanks, Dr. Bitcoin. Lorraine Sleet, who wants to be under communism? What's communism got to do with this, Lorraine? Chili, go back to playing your card game, bro. This stream is very ignorant. Sorry, Chili. I made some GT7 videos for you today. Says, I want it to be fake. I want it to be a fake location, and then cutting in the back looks real though. Amber, even though he is from an independent republic, this is your friend, separated from Moldova, he said he supports Ukraine because it is a different situation than what his place was back in the day when they separated. Chuck White, or we can just tell NATO that Ukraine is off limits and have them stay neutral. Simple. Even Henry Kissinger's been saying this for years. I think if in a very realistic capital R sense, and this is what China has been saying with Ukraine being a bridge between the East and the West, I don't know how you square Ukraine being sovereign and being able to decide what to do with the realistic fact that if Ukraine is a Western ally, that is a security risk for Moscow. And if Ukraine is under the Russian sphere of influence, that is a security risk for Europe. I just don't know how you square that with Ukraine's right to self-determination. Helena, untruth always is a reflection of truth. Zelensky has to be alive to say something about how they were capturing him about and what he's done. And every time truth corrects it, lie dies. Welcome, Fafnir. Chris, how long does this last in your opinion? Stock market's taking a battering. More people. I've no idea. I've no idea. It's up to Russia, really. Techno, part of the issue is Poland would have less aircraft and be vulnerable, as USA doesn't have the F-16s ready to go. Yeah, I think there'll be people in chat who know a lot better than me, but I think the US Air Force has export versions of its fighter jets. Joseph, his acting background is helping Ukraine win the PR war, even if they aren't winning the Grand War. I haven't seen the music video, no. I wonder if Putin just expected Zelensky to flee. Maybe he expected Zelensky not to be a serious politician. Obviously, he will have signed... I can't remember if Zelensky was there for Minsk too, but he will have been in Zelensky's presence, and maybe he thought this was a time to act, and maybe Zelensky surprised him. I don't know. Welcome, Kosha. Welcome, Philly. Good to see you both. So, moving aircraft around that is a fairly big logistic operation. Yeah, it would seem for it to happen, Poland would need to take the hit in terms of, I believe their Air Force base is somewhere around here. They would need to take the hit. Security-wise, and maybe that's not acceptable. Says the reason I want it to be fake is because it's such a security risk. Welcome, Liam. Welcome, Michael. Sorry, Chile, I can't remember your question. Jeff, sending planes to Ukraine would be considered an entrance to war by Russia, and that would mean that country renewed. I don't agree they would be. I don't agree with the second part of that. But by sending, if Poland sends its MiG-29s into Ukraine, or realistically leaves them there for Ukrainian pilots to fly in and pick them up, a bit like a Hertz, then they really stand out. They really stand out, and you know, if Russia does occupy Ukraine, then Poland's in a very difficult position anyway. If Russia does occupy Ukraine, because then Krakow is not that far from, and Warsaw as well. It does change things very drastically in that part of the world. Point 44, Kira, do you think NATO is to cease expansion? I think there is a question about if NATO is a defensive pact, and the aims of NATO are to prevent war around the world, particularly on the European continent, you could perhaps say, or between Russia, then it might be a little bit late now, but should NATO have disbanded at some point after the Soviet Union collapsing? But we don't know what would have happened if it had disbanded. But I can see there is a question there. Andrew, thinking hopefully here with a dash of realism, Crimea and sovereignty of it will remain a big issue. Is future governance of the model based on all nine's potential opinion? What you mean, like a power sharing arrangement? I wouldn't say Northern Ireland's power sharing arrangement is the best example of a functioning executive. Well, to the extent that there's now peace in Northern Ireland, I guess. It's a great point, Andrew. That is a very practical kind of proposed solution that I haven't really thought about before. I think Crimea is too far gone. I think Crimea had a referendum where Crimea vastly voted to be part of Russia. I don't know if anyone can verify that or not. Welcome, Mr. Elisi. Liam, has there been any movement on the convoy? I'm not sure, to be honest. This is where it is. LHGS, the difference between the expansion of NATO and Russia is that joining NATO is not free will and Russia wants to do it by force. It is an interesting point that I think is easily lost, is that Russia wants to expand its sphere of influence, but the countries it wants to expand to don't want to be part of Russia. Belarus is perhaps the exception. But Ukraine, as a result of what Russia has done with this invasion, Ukraine, Moldova and Georgia have applied to join the European Union. So it's a bit like if a bully wants someone to do something, they bully them, and it just makes that person even less likely, or less, it makes them less wanting to do that. I can't explain it properly. That's true, Andrea. It's a very good point that I haven't really heard before. I'm not sure Stormont is functional at the moment because I think someone stood down. ZSP says Ukraine is doomed. They can't get this war without NATO, who's not coming. So better for Ukrainians to make compromise and negotiate with Russians before Russians totally overrule them. We will see. It's hideous, but if the going gets tough, then we will see. It's a horrible situation to be in. It's a horrible negotiating perspective. Because at that point it's how much do you value your values over a negotiated way out that would compromise your values but save actual probably hundreds of thousands of lives. It's a horrible position to be in, I think. Not sure what you're on about, Chile, but if there's any hint of anti-Semitism, then you will be banned permanently. Jado, why is NATO in EU? I can't. It's a. I'm not sure that's. I can't answer that. Slow. They can win with numbers. Russia won't be able to fight 20 million armed civilians. Alchemy. When do you think they are going to separate and disconnect the Russian part of the ISS from the rest? I'm not sure you can separate the Russian part of the ISS. I think the ISS project may just have to be decommissioned earlier, because I think it really is a joint project that relies a lot on Russian cosmonauts and Russian rockets and suppliers. I'm not sure what your comment was, but you said by the art of Jewish deception, Chile. It's a bit of a... not sure what point you're trying to make there. What do you mean by the art of Jewish deception, Chile, Billy? So it's up to you to explain that statement, really. Because NATO is mainly EU countries? Okay, I see. Because, so well, actually, the purpose of the EU, or the European Economic Community, was to prevent another war in Europe by interdepending France and Germany's economies on each other. And again, NATO was a collective pact that really had its biggest influence here against the Warsaw Pact. So it is about ensuring peace in the continent of Europe. I think you have to be on like a last warning, Chili Billy. You haven't explained why you made that statement. JD, I can't see Russia overrunning Ukraine completely, considering just on 95% of the troops are in Ukraine. Yeah, I've heard that from the US, from the Pentagon, I think, that almost 100% of Russia's deployed troops, so I think we're around 200,000, are now in Ukraine. So they are really committed at this point. Well, I think they have about maybe 600,000 troops elsewhere. Chile, can I say cabal? Is that better? What's Jewish got to do with it, Chile? Just very simple question to you. Welcome, Samantha. Watched the evacuation out of Kyiv earlier, and it was constant explosions for hours. The fact no soldier or civilian flinched broke my heart, like they're used to it. It is pretty shocking. The video yesterday of the family being killed who were evacuating with their suitcases is just very tragic and shocking, and I imagine it will resonate. There'll be a lot of families around the world who will, yeah. Andrew, American interest in the ISS is going to wane anyway as the Return to Moon program gets going. That's true. If you have a base on the moon, it's basically a Western blot. Russia was declined entry to NATO 2002. Yeah, I heard that George Robertson spoke with Putin, and he said Putin didn't want to wait behind other countries. I think at that stage in 2002, Putin seemed to be much less anti-Western. Well, that was the impression that was given. Dylan, is the UK doing enough to support Ukraine? The 50 refugees we've taken to pathetic. Questions over, are we sanctioning enough oligarchs where the UK government is abroad? I don't know, to be honest. I've no idea. I would imagine that most of the refugees are, sorry, are crossing the border by car, train, or by foot. So it isn't a European Defence Force tool. I agree that NATO is, the most important member of NATO is the United States. But there was a situation in Europe where you had, East and West Germany and these two blocks against each other. So NATO really had I believe had a unique importance in Europe, but that wasn't its sole importance. The only time, obviously, Article 5 has been invoked by NATO was an attack on the United States against Afghanistan. Welcome, Capone. Alex Muir, does anyone know of any tech-related projects that someone can contribute to for Ukraine or even Russian citizens? I don't know, I'm afraid. Chat, why? All because we couldn't provide simple security guarantees to Russia. They've been asking via diplomacy for 8 years now. I do agree that it didn't seem to be on the radar of perhaps the West just how sensitive this question was. I recommend lectures from Mearsheimer and Posner. Yeah, I think Mearsheimer has been consistently outspoken on this for at least a decade. Kind of predicting it as well, almost. Samantha Bonds, the people in the UK complaining on Facebook around people buying on nappies and form a drop of points for refugees, but it kind of makes me proud. But since the collapse of the Soviet Union, it's basically morphed into a pan-EU defence force because the EU cannot raise its army, has no power to do so. Yeah, that has been mooted from time to time. Dan, I'm almost looking at my two boys and saying how fortunate we are to not be in a situation like Ukraine conflict. I can't help but feeling guilty just sitting here comfy. Yep, and again, I you know, there are places that you can donate clothes, etc. But it is a terrible situation. We are incredibly privileged that we are not in this war zone. Yeah, it's a terrible situation. See, Stephen? Ingus, I asked you recently if you'd like to see a subbed Russian war propaganda video. Yeah, I've seen that. I've actually seen that video. I think subtitled, with the kind of girl presenting it, and you know, people explaining to her what the reason is for the war in Ukraine, or they don't call it a war. I think two kind of international relation theorists that have are now probably viewed in very different lights. One is Mearsheimer, who was outspoken on these conflicts but said how important it was. And the other is Francis Fukuyama, who said after the fall of the Soviet Union, that was the end of history. So two very different, I guess, like idealist and realist points of view. I can't remember, Ingus. I didn't watch the whole 30 minutes. Have you seen the Russian influences? I haven't, I'm afraid. Alex Muir, out of interest, is there any of the Russian narrative that is generally being accepted on? I don't know to what extent. So I don't know if anyone knows. I believe there was a referendum in Crimea. I don't know. Again, I can definitely say that what has been going on in Donetsk and Luhansk, I don't think really has been reported in the West, or wasn't reported with much significance. The only time recently, since 2014, it has come into the Western consciousness was probably with MH17, which was an absolutely tragic. So I just don't know enough about it. But even if you take this as a basis for the Russian invasion, it doesn't explain why they are shelling Kyiv and trying to take Kyiv. Russia threw so many pretexts in that speech by Putin on dawn of the war. Samantha, just wondering, as I'm not as educated to stuff most here, but why do Russia and Ukraine keep continuing with talks, even though they've both made it clear they don't agree? I think like any negotiation, it was really important early on in the war that they did meet to talk, because it establishes those lines. The negotiators become more familiar with each other. You slowly establish what the common ground is, and then eventually you can get to that point where you can agree something. Sean Michael, can you see a peace accord that cuts Ukraine in half so they maintain all NATO border states in West Belarus East? I can see a peace accord that recognises the Russian annexation of Crimea and also the independence of these eastern regions as a kind of stopgap. Again, it seems that compared to if that was a negotiated way out as an alternative to hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians losing their lives, I can see that as a negotiated settlement, but it does kick the can down the road, right? Basically, you end up in a slightly more advanced Minsk 2 situation. I can leak. Jolly Farm says Ukraine is showing some signs of starting to win. I think it's difficult to tell. I mean, I feel like it's difficult to tell. Welcome, Chris. Joseph, Russia offered a very lopsided peace treaty that Zelensky couldn't accept because Russia can't be trusted now. Yeah, Zelensky was saying very on that he can't trust Putin. But even if you don't trust Putin, if you see it as a way to reach essentially a ceasefire, I don't know, it's a pretty desperate situation. Point 44, we keep hearing about Russia sending in agents to site rather than protest. We think it's possible that NATO have been subverting Ukraine time. I don't know about subverting, but so Ukraine's government at times has been Russian leaning, at times has been Western leaning. There's been 2004 Orange Revolution leading to a Western looking government, and I believe that was when, was it Yanukovych? I can't remember. But the Western leaning president was poisoned, and then I can't remember who it was. And then in 2014, you had the Euromaidan protests. Again, another Western leading government responded to by Russia with the annexation and the support of the independence movements in the East. But it kind of feels like you can't. On one side, you have free and fair democracy, and on the other side is not free and fair democracy, if that makes sense. Ultimately, if you agree in free and fair democracy, then the people vote, and whoever they vote for has legitimacy. So if the West is supporting Ukraine by trying to support free and fair elections, is that undue influence by the West, or is that just supporting free and fair elections? I don't know. It's a bit of a difficult one. Chile, Putin has not wanted war this whole time, but Zelensky, on the other hand, hasn't taken his army greens off of the TV screens. Robert, hate to say it, but there will be no peace while Putin is in power. Samantha could listen to you talk all day. There's honestly, hundreds of videos on my channel if you want. Bram, do you see Ukraine not losing any land? I think it's almost impossible for Ukraine to not lose any land. It depends whether you view Crimea as part of Russian territory now or not. Brian, isn't Zelensky just an actor? Yeah, a bit like Ronald Reagan was. So again, I'm not skilled enough to explain that point, but I think the question was something like, if Russia has been, I think the word was subverting Ukraine, has the West been subverting Ukraine? But it does seem to be a point that can easily be shot down by kind of doublespeak and whatnot, that if you are supporting free and fair elections, so let's say the West is funding electoral bodies and, I don't know, other things that contribute to free and fair elections, is that subverting? And if Russia is supporting independence movements, so people that do want to be independent, and Russia is supporting them with arms and funding, is that subverting? It's very difficult. Headshot, helping the people have legitimate say in their government is never a bad thing. But you can see that from Russia's perspective, if there's a Russian-leaning government in place, and then there's a section of the population that is protesting, and Europe supports those protests, and those protests lead to the overthrow of the government and a European-leaning government in place, you can see how that is viewed in Russia. But I feel like it's not exactly the same. It's there is light and dark. There is good and bad, surely. There is moral and immoral. Soren, he wants to permanently keep Ukraine out of NATO and the EU. He wants to add a buffer between Russia and NATO. I think NATO also wants Ukraine as a buffer, but I may be wrong. Creative, if Ukraine holds Kharkiv, can they survive? I don't know. It's I'm not sure how it's possible to keep Kharkiv. It entirely depends on how much destruction Russia wants to cause. It's so close to the Russian border. Bram, do you think they're to take the peace deal offered recently? I can see that the peace deal does. We've been speaking on these streams for the last 12 days about that would be the core of the peace deal. Crimea, Donbass, agreement not to join NATO, and perhaps the EU as well, and general demilitarization. So those have always been the likely terms that, if any terms were acceptable to Russia, they always like to be those ones. Jolly, all you guys remember this: Russia threw the first stone, not Ukraine. Ukraine never wanted to throw Russia's government. It was Russia that wanted to throw Ukraine's. Captain Polish, welcome Captain Polish again. What is Putin's timetable? I don't think anyone knows. I mean, purportedly he'd ordered Kyiv to be taken in 2 weeks, I believe. Or maybe it was Kyiv in a few days and the country in 2 weeks, I can't remember. But by those accounts, it's behind. Alchemy, Ukraine are buffering NATO right now. I agree. But, Ukraine here is a buffer towards NATO. NATO can supply weapons and, support Ukraine in its war against Russia, but NATO doesn't have its skin in the game here. It's not a question. NATO is not weakened by this. If this invasion for whatever reason was going on in Estonia, then there's a real fundamental existential question of NATO, which is, do they recognise an Article 5 invocation by Estonia? Is Estonia worth World War III over? That isn't happening here. There's no question here asked about Article 5. NATO's very clear on that. NATO has basically established that Ukraine, Russia occupying Ukraine is tolerable. And that is the luxury of having a buffer state like this. It would be the same, by the way, if, let's say there were, because there were protests in Belarus. Let's say there's significant protests in Belarus. Let's say there's a revolution, and then the EU comes in and supports it. Ultimately that's not a declaration of war on Moscow. That's not EU troops going into Russia. So it kind of cuts both ways, I think. John, why would someone agree to demilitarize when they're being invaded? That just allows it to happen down the road. Again, I agree. And it's even more difficult to demilitarize now. I agree Estonia's in NATO, but my point is that if Russia were to invade Estonia, completely hypothetically, theoretically Estonia can invoke Article 5, but in realistically, does NATO recognise it, or does NATO actually decide not to recognise it? Because by recognising Article 5 invocation, it is saying we're going to start World War III. Sorry if I didn't make that point. William sounded like Putin is stuck in a sycophantic echo chamber. We've spoken about that on previous streams as well, in terms of the more authoritarian a political system you have, do you become more isolated? Do you become less exposed to different viewpoints? Daniel, NATO might not be weakened by this, but the guy in the Kremlin knows that he won't get any resistance from anyone just based on all of his last military exercises. I think don't fully understand that. That's Mike for that update. Happy Meal, NATO has to recognise it surely, otherwise what's the point of being in NATO? I'm just saying from a very real politic sense. Right now, there's no tough question being asked of the fundamental NATO treaty here. Because Ukraine is not in NATO. If Russia were to invade a small NATO member, then NATO does have a choice to make whether to recognise that invocation. In the same way that it had a choice to make when it about the Article 5 invocation after September the 11th. That's just something I'm saying. It's not. That's just a point I'm making. It's not something that's true or untrue or whatever. It's, and let me know if you strongly disagree with it and say there's no way that if Russia invaded Estonia that NATO wouldn't immediately declare war on Russia. Then let me know. Alex Mears, if a nation invokes Article 5, NATO. So basically, there's many thresholds, and we spoke about this previously. There's many thresholds that need to be reached for there to be a nuclear World War III, i.e., the end of days. So NATO is a defensive pact. Ukraine is a lowercase ally of NATO. Ukraine shares the same values as NATO members. Ukraine is a friend of NATO. NATO here is supporting Ukraine, or NATO members are supporting Ukraine with military weapons. But it's not a threshold that's been reached for NATO to get itself involved and declare war on Russia. Now, if Russia was to invade a small NATO member, then theoretically NATO should invoke Article 5. But by invoking Article 5, that would be certain World War III. And so NATO has to live with that and say, right, yeah, that was worth invoking World War III. Because at the moment, NATO could decide this is worth World War III. It could decide to impose a no-fly zone, and that would almost certainly result in a World War III situation, I think. Now, if Russia were to invade Estonia and NATO does invoke or recognise the invocation of Article 5, then there's still another possible threshold that may not be met, which is to spill over from a conventional World War III into a nuclear World War III. And that the last kind of defense of humanity there is the logical theory of mutually assured destruction. So again, theoretically, can you have a conventional World War III and both sides restrain from using nuclear weapons because of mutual destruction? Some very maybe controversial points in there. Mohammed, it shows that Russia doesn't have a problem with countries having ties with NATO. It mostly has problems with the prospect of a neighbouring country joining the alliance. Point 44, NATO lost all credibility from me in Kosovo. They showed that they put themselves above the UN. Kosovo is an interesting point. I don't know if that was NATO... NATO being relevant after the fall of the Soviet Union. Chuck, hence why the Article 5 invocation potential threat in Ukraine within a short distance to Moscow was not tolerable to Russians. Exactly. Exactly, because... well, we know why. Yeah, that's true, Mohammed. NATO and Russia did go on joint exercises together, and there was a big question about after the Soviet Union whether NATO was necessary anymore. You know, the Warsaw Pact was no more. Did NATO need to exist? But we don't know what would have happened if NATO had disbanded. Thanks, John. If you got a registration from that, let us know. Alexandra Menapace, NATO, US, EU are not seeking to change borders. They're not seeking to invade Russia. Authoritarians must manufacture crisis to justify their aggression. Yeah, so the current international rules-based order, what does rules-based order mean? It basically means that United Nations has this framework that respects the sovereignty of nations. And ultimately, there's a lot of questions about to what extent Russia was provoked to do this. But there has to be a difference between provocation and actually invading another country. I don't think there's any way of spinning that or spinning them to equalize the provocation and the response here. I don't know. Unless that's quite an idealist point of view. Jelly Farm says World War III will be fought with conventional weapons. Alison, what if Ukraine went into Russia fighting? I don't know. I think there's been a couple of reports of Ukraine kind of trying to target air bases, perhaps just in Russia, that I saw early on. But I think the Ukrainian president made a statement where he said he is not... You know, they are not attacking Russia. Russia is attacking them. Welcome back to Poker Club. Andrew says Bosnia War, NATO and Russia were on the same site. I can't remember the reasons why the UN Security Council didn't... Why it wasn't a UN peacekeeping force. Robert says no, if Russia attacks the NATO part, there is war. If no, if buts or whys. We will see. Well, I hope we don't see. But we will see. Again, we talked about this a lot last night, actually. BSDF, there's also the possibility that a limited amount of nukes don't trigger a mutual destruction scenario. That's true, but it could very easily escalate, I think. Samantha, I don't understand a lot of this. I'm here for the comedic value every so often while I attempt to understand what on earth is going on. A lot of people in the same boat, Samantha. I don't pretend to know what's going on. Brown, what happens if NATO members attack each other? It's an interesting question. The larger the defensive pact gets, it must be in the treaty. I actually don't know what the process would be. It's a really good question. And again, perhaps illustrates that in reality NATO did exist against one common foe, which was Russia and the Warsaw Pact. And after the Soviet Union fell, NATO seems to be repurposed into, again, another vehicle to give legitimacy to perhaps the USA acting as the world's policeman, as the country that I think was the strongest behind action in Kosovo, and also invoking Article 5 after September 11th. So it's a very good question. But if Russia joined NATO, what would be the point of alliance? Yeah, so who is the common foe? Does a defensive pact need a common foe? Is it a bad thing if more countries are in a defensive pact and therefore they don't? Because obviously being in NATO, you know, you go on military exercises, you share intelligence, you actually use the same ammunition. So the things are more interchangeable. Kaki, will Russia's net charge be Georgia? By that name, are you Georgian? Sonia, I wonder what the Ukrainian government's casualty threshold is. I really don't think NATO intervene here. I don't know, but again, it's a very difficult decision when it comes to negotiating. If you're negotiating with what's worse, perhaps even worse than a gun against your head, it's a very difficult position. The Debt Poker Club says Ukraine won't recognise Crimea, Donetsk, and Luhansk. Putin won't stop. USA, NATO, UN, EU, etc. will be forced to enter into military conflict. I just can't see either one of them backing down. I don't know. Sam saying if Ukraine wanted to cripple Russia, it would just strike one of the main train lines. It's so for Russia to use train lines to transport most military. I've seen lots of military vehicles on train lines. Slow says the offensive nation is kicked out. The problem is, as you can see here, Russia says that Ukraine is the offensive nation by committing atrocities in the Donbass, and for Ukraine and the rest of the world, Russia is most of the rest of the world, Russia is the offensive nation by committing the invasion. Robert, yeah, I have to strongly disagree with you. We will not see, because if they do not come to the aid of another NATO country, then there is no NATO period. We will see. We will see. I don't know. Dan, do you think the reduced media coming at the front line is a positive sign or a negative one? Troops to be fighting? I think all the information that's coming out is, a lot of it is designed to have an impact one way or another. So again, I don't know, but I'm not sure there has been a slowdown in media coming out or not. I just don't know one way or the other. Thanks, John. Another Globemaster. Then it says Article 8. When they attack one another in base, you get kicked out. Happy Meal, idea for Zelensky. How about Ukraine attacks NATO? NATO responds by invading Ukraine. I see what you're doing there. Jelly Farm, this is why NATO was formed, to help protect the world from Russia. Russia has created its own version of NATO called the Warsaw Pact, which was dissolved when USFL. Now Russia doing it again. Yeah, maybe this is the reason why NATO does exist. Because even after the fall of the Soviet Union and communism had changed by then, but you could say the fall of communism in Russia, maybe these underlying burning currents were still there. William, I'm more concerned about an imploded rebelling Russia with mass poverty possibly being annexed by China like Russia's been doing recently. I guess getting ahead of myself with Russian power vacuum. Yeah, we haven't thought too much about what happens if Russia is really not successful. What that means. Routine, you could argue that NATO is stopping Western Europe from going to war with each other. Yeah, you could say that, and joint military exercises, more dependencies between each other. That was the exact premise of the EEC. Kaki, yes, I'm Georgian, and I remember that in 2008 was the same. Well, but no one stopped Russia when it was possible. Ukraine invasion as a result of this. Yeah, 2008 in Georgia. 2014. Be interesting if after Yeltsin, Russia wasn't such at odds with kind of either the international framework or the Western ideal, which whatever you want to put it. But how would the world be? Techno, in that case, what if Ukraine surrendered to NATO under temporary measure? Yeah, I don't know if anyone knows where the NATO aircraft carriers are. For example, what is it? United States, is they Nimitz class aircraft carriers and the 2 UK aircraft carriers. I don't know if anyone knows where they are in the world. William, also, were any of these corridors back to Ukraine? I read that a lot of them were back to Russia, and that was very contentious. Why would Ukrainian citizens being invaded by Russia want to go through a humanitarian corridor to Russia? But I think they all unfortunately fell apart anyway. What do you think is going to happen with China, Taiwan? It's a very different situation. Chris says it's in the Aegean. Okay. South of Turkey. Does anyone know if the US has any warships in the Black Sea at the moment? That may be Iridex because it's turned its transponder on there, but I don't know. Samantha says, I work from home, I have to deal with the conflict each day as I work for IKEA, and they've stopped all supply from Russia, which is a lot. Yeah, I think just a lot of more private companies imposing sanctions now. Just refresh all my sources. Again, it seems like if there is going to be a push on Kyiv, it hasn't happened yet. Albeit, and I've seen more generous maps towards Russia in terms of showing Russian territory. It seems like Kyiv is now on the verge of being surrounded on the north and the east. Kaki says a Harry Truman in the Aegean, okay. BSDF, didn't Turkey close Black Sea for every military? I don't think it closed it for every military. I think it closed it to the Russian fleets that don't have home ports here. As they viewed what Russia had done as an act of war. Search and Destroy says France has an aircraft carrier in the Black Sea. Mr. Jean says Nimitz class probably wouldn't fit in the Black Sea. It's a big ocean kind of vessel. Would it fit through the Bosphorus? You'd imagine it would. Some of these bridges are absolutely insane. They don't look that impressive from satellite, but they are seriously... That's a lot of traffic that goes on them. John McCormick says US Navy in the Mediterranean being reinforced. Jan, is Turkish Bosphorus also close to NATO ships? I don't believe so. I may be wrong. Nice, Andrew. Is that coming home? Is that an RF plane coming home? Look at this flight plan. It's 8,000 feet. I've flown out of Istanbul. I've never flown into Istanbul, but I've flown out of Istanbul. 8,000 feet. Boeing 777. Now under 8,000 feet. Don't know if it's delayed or something. Events like this really highlight improvements to the human race. I can see is investing less in new energy. Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be an increase in defence spending globally. You've seen Germany is doing an unprecedented kind of increase in the budget, and that money has to come from somewhere. So, yeah, that means less money on healthcare and education and other things. Oh, nice, Andrew. What time am I going? I think midnight, so we'll go to midnight. Where is this plane going? 7,000 feet. Ceasefire. William says already nearing 2 million left Ukraine. It is an astonishing number, really. Mr. Jean says the Nimitz is a floating city. Got to worry about displacement. Does anyone know where this plane is headed? It's now only 6,000 feet. Search for the Charles de Gaulle is the only nuclear power carrier completed outside of the United States Navy. Where is this plane going? Is it going to circle? Maybe there's an interesting flight plan. Oh, here we go, Ataturk Airport. This must be it. Big airport. G's on it. Thanks, Sabin. Yeah, so I've flown out of Ataturk, but I've never flown into it. Right. Let's see. It's going to be quite a wide approach, isn't it? But look at the flight plan it's had to take. I mean, extraordinary, really. See these other planes on this flight plan. There's a different one for boats. I can't remember what it's called, but I've been on it. Thanks, Ingus, for the €5. Thanks for Ukraine streams and you as well. Thanks, Ingus. It's probably about that video, right? Did you subtitle it? Right, where in the US have you been? I've been to New York. I've been to Chicago. I've been to LA, San Francisco, Las Vegas. Yeah, I've been around. Says, what does Royal Flight mean? I can't remember where you see... Oh, Royal Flight, I don't know. I don't know if that's the airline. I haven't heard of Royal Flight before. Oh, thanks, John, for the 250 Filipino pesos. Good luck. Is that a good luck to this plane? Thanks, John. Yeah, that car was in... that picture of that car was on the Pacific Coast Highway. Thanks, John. Yeah, I'll need some coffees. It's a... This surely is the only flight plan it could take. I wonder if anyone knows how much longer this is. Seems to be quite an aggressive approach if it's going to bank it. We went to the worst cities besides Vegas. Okay. Yeah, we'll get the ship tracker on next stream. We can get a subscription to it. Thanks to all the donations and adverts, we'll get a subscription to it. So should we get this up on 3D? Here we go. Seems quite... Is it going to circle again? Something? 4,000 feet. Okay, yeah. My bad. We'll do a flight simulator stream sometime. Dreamliner. Yep, that is too wacky. There's a lot of fights in the over Romania and such. Thanks, John. I was thinking what we could do is we could do this stream one time, and this window here we can go in Flight Simulator because I've got the new Microsoft Flight Simulator, and we can fly around. Get an idea of the geography and stuff like that. This is this flight here. Basically, it's come from Moscow. I don't know if that is the indication of Moscow or not, but it's come from Moscow into Istanbul. It's had to really go the long way around, and it's now circling above Ataturk International Airport. Is it going to another airport? Okay. It's 4,000 feet. It's a very unusual flight plan, it seems, but I don't really know. This must be one of the football stadiums for one of the many football teams in Turkey. I don't think it's Besiktas. I think Besiktas Stadium is much nearer the Bosphorus. I think Galatasaray Stadium is north, so maybe it's Fenerbahce. I don't know. I might be completely wrong. I'm going to guess it's Fenerbahce. Might not even be a football stadium. Yes, Andrew, I have to do that. Says I don't think he knows where he's going. Welcome, Mike. Welcome along. So hang on. Where is he going? Is that the destination there? Hang on, let's get out of 3D. Oops. Ah, okay. Okay, Istanbul Airport here. Whoa. Okay, that is that's a big boy airport. Sorry, Ataturk, but Ataturk is this is like London Stansted. This is Heathrow. Well, really, it's like Amsterdam, isn't it, Schiphol? These runways like this. It's a 3-runway airport, or is it a 5-runway airport? Oh, it's the Olympic Stadium. Got it all wrong. I have been to Turkey. I have been to Istanbul, but you wouldn't know. Yeah, 5-runway airport. Heathrow has 2. Amsterdam, I believe, has 4. I've been to Amsterdam Airport quite a few times. It's a pretty insane airport, isn't it? Terminal here. Big terminal here. So, a very unusual flight plan. Is there a reason why it didn't approach from here? I guess if it has to land in a northern direction, I suppose this makes sense. Dylan Shipple's mental to fly out of. Samantha's not been abroad at all, scared of flying. There's nothing wrong with that. I think one of the most interesting ones I've flown out of is London City Airport. Which is a very unusual approach and departure. Putin, are we getting nuked? No, we're not. William, they overbuild massive infrastructure for Turkey, one of the cheapest places to fly into country. Do you mean in terms of airport slots? Joseph says O'Hare has 8 runways. I have flown into O'Hare. I'm trying to remember. What if the tower was messing with the mate logo long way around? 2,000 feet. It would be cool if in flight radar you could get the ATC traffic calls as well. That would really take it to the next. I mean, this is pretty cool already. This is already better than Flight Simulator 97 or whatever it was. Those are some of the northern Norway airports are fun. Marty hit a bird on a takeoff in London City. Who's had the... Is anyone in chat? There's over 350 people watching. Who in chat has had the most interesting approach or takeoff? Venatus, BA and other airlines do have a course for those who have fear of flying. They're really good. That's good to know. G did a pit office tracker. I don't know. Thanks, Captain Polish, for some in-flight snacks. Thank you. Well, if we want to next time, we can mix it up. It's funny, on a night to light it seems appropriate. On another night it just might not be appropriate. We just don't know. But I can do a separate I can do just a completely separate Flight Simulator stream anyway. I've got it on the Xbox and I've got it on PC as well. Thanks for the $20, Captain Polish. In-flight snacks are rarer these days. I think KLM still give them out for free. Andrew, most interesting airport for me is probably Arvidsjaur. Landing in a flying washing machine onto ice. Sounds fun. Nicholas Toko said he has 2 major airports. William had a engine go out. Says I sat in the cockpit on the Leon approach landing. Very lucky. Putin's never been on an airplane. Liam says Gatwick's got a monorail, trying to sell Gatwick there. Robert, the old Hong Kong airport was cool to look at. John McCormick was crew on a military C-130. Wow. Chris, our plane got hit by another plane on the runway one time. The wings collided. Sounds really bad. Issa, Manchester is depressing and run down if you like that stuff. Good to know, Issa. Right, this plane is finally landing. This is really therapeutic. This is like, I feel good for the soul. Just watching a plane do its thing, coming into land. This is really relaxing. With 350 people just watching this plane come into land, having done a long detour around the Black Sea. Going to be a textbook landing, not deploying the gears, not needed. And there we go. Now time to taxi. Flight radar is so good. If it could make the airport terminals 3D, then potential game changer. Is there a reason why we can't see any... Oh yeah, is there a way that we can get every plane here in 3D? Because if we come out of 3D, there's loads of plane taxi. There's a plane taking off now. Like, is there a way that we can just get a 3D view of that space? 777 going to Caracas. Wow. Yeah, I've seen Big Jet TV. That guy's great. I think they're called Wheels, Samantha. John, ever seen the comedy film Airplane? A long time ago, yeah. Nicholas, I had a lightning strike on a C-130 I was riding in. I was asleep the whole time, but I guess because we had to go down 10k. Sounds intense. I don't know if this is a paid feature. We have paid flight radar. I don't know if it's free or not, but it's very, very cool. Can we see the route as well? So is this plane now going right into the Black Sea? So presumably it's going to have to go port pretty quickly. Oh, there's the route map. Look at that. Istanbul to Caracas. What age we live in. Techno, no, because it only generates the current selection in LoSat model. Okay, that would be a nice feature though. Rip says Luca Airport, Nepal. Was that the really short runway? CP was tracking a flight the other day from San Francisco to Abu Dhabi. Will never get over them flying up and over rather than round. And you get 3 goes at 3D when on free flight radar. Okay, good to know. Is that another plane that we're tracking we can see in the air? Go to aircraft. So you can kind of do it, right? We can see other aircraft nearby. This one is going to Moscow. This is Istanbul to Moscow. This is the return flight. Another Dreamliner. And we get out of 3D. Yeah, I mean, that is the purported route. So is this plane going to go the same way, or is it going to go the west way around? Okay, this is interesting actually. Looks like it might be heading west. So is there a reason why south they're going around the Black Sea this way and north they're going that way? Does anyone know? Yeah, I remember that line, Katie. Brendan says, if you have Flight Simulator, you can essentially be in the game of live traffic. Yeah, I have Flight Simulator. So we could do that, actually. Gary says, welcome, Gary. O'Hare has 9 runways. Maybe it's the jet stream. I don't think there's a... Oh, I don't know. I don't think there's a jet... Maybe it's the prevailing winds, I don't know, but does anyone in chat know why this return flight is going, well, this way, southbound, why it's going that way? Think about these streams as you never know how they're going to go, right? You never know how they're going to go. It's like when I do sim racing streams, it's like, okay, today we're going to do this race. It's going to be a 3-hour race or a 6-hour race or a 12-hour race or 24-hour race, but that's the race. And that's what the stream's about. And these streams, we just don't know. We have no idea. Well, but I don't think that's its path. It looks to be going west, though. I'm pretty sure this isn't... Well, obviously that's not its path. That's what... It's just been plotted by flight radar. Its flight plan, I believe, is going to go like that. There might be an estimate. Even this right here, an estimate. Andreas, Ukraine is virtually a roundabout for air traffic now. Yeah, that's true. Oh, you mean a roundabout? What, like... Hang on. This one, TK. Not sure. This one. Wow, so this one is going to Bangkok. And yeah, it's going to go south. It's going to go south of the Black Sea. Even though with the way that the world is curved, I'd imagine it's much quicker to go that way, but I may be wrong. That one's going to Seoul, Korea. Perhaps I'd have a map of the trade winds. We can get weather on here. Clouds, radar, winds. Oh, I need to upgrade more. Okay. There's another upgrade. I've only got gold. To get turbulence and... Okay. Well, we'll have to get that one though. We can get intense precipitation. We can get total precipitation, aka rain. We can get total rain. I've got cloud on. I don't know why, but I've got cloud on. Volcanic eruption. Okay. What if we mix that with precipitation? Or we can get North American radar. Let's turn off. Wow, that is a... Anyone in just off the coast here? Is that a big weather front moving in? New York State? Oh, welcome G to County Corporal. Seen you in a number of streams, hope you're enjoying it. I know you're absolutely on it with the planes. You're probably a flight radar 24 expert. I'm not. Australian radar. Don't have anything else. And then we can do aubergine emojis. We can do hybrid, which is what I have as radar. I think this is the default. I can't remember. We have it as hybrid. We can have the day-night line, which is pretty cool. ATC boundaries. If only there was something for ATC audio. Aircraft icon size. Yeah. Aircraft labels. I need to get acquainted a bit more with their flight radar. Ventus, if you want a free coffee, I own an aviation coffee company. Provide Big Jet TV. Wow, I've been mentioned in the same dispatches as Big Jet TV. Complete imposter. It is almost midnight UK time, so again, the stream we're going to go till midnight. So if you do have any other streams that you recommend, feel free to put them in the chat. And then if YouTube is going to bring in a feature where I can set the stream to go somewhere else, and I think the chat will all go, which I think would be a cool feature when they bring it in, but we can do it manually at the moment. So if people want to go somewhere else, put it in the chat and people can go together maybe. G's a meteorologist. Very nice. Calvin says that just ripped through my city. Dave, yeah, the big storm over USA eastern states. What is Breas doing? I've seen a few people mention Breas. Let me put that in. Did Andrew say it was drifting? I imagine it's ideally it would be doing a kind of similar pattern, right? But it does seem to be on a little bit of a more expressionist interpretation of the flight plan, perhaps. See if we can see the pilot. Andrew's nominating the worst airport as the international airport east of Philadelphia. Oh no, just Philadelphia airport. Well, that might start an international. There's a big free spot above your face. Yeah, we can put something there like that. Again, I'm trying to keep it neutral, but put something like that. This one was a big spot on my face. Techno in the UK, I didn't get AC online. Easter, check out my channel. I have no videos of note. Okay. Let me put that into. Yeah, we're gonna. That's a couple minutes. Gonna end this one. Oops. C-17 Globemaster, big old plane. I think there is a model for this. Yeah. It doesn't. I think the thing about the C-17, I think this is a plane that was in that footage in Afghanistan when it was taking off out of Afghanistan. There were people still holding onto the plane. It's very surreal footage, right? It was kind of almost looked like a juxtaposition of eras in a way. Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Sonia. Thanks, Deck Poker Club. Vice Mirth, another great YouTube for foreign policy is View of the Fifth Column on YouTube. Right, chat. So I'm gonna CP giving the weather update. I'm gonna end the stream there. If you have enjoyed it and you're new, do feel free to subscribe. There's a lot of people here that have been part of the community for a long time, which is very, very cool. And yeah, we'll see what the situation is tomorrow around 10 PM. I may be streaming some Gran Turismo 7 tomorrow as well in the daytime. We will see. And yeah, I'm going to go to our members page. It's been a very relaxing and comforting stream. And maybe that reflects kind of how we are perceiving the... But things can change very quickly. But again, we're engaged, we're present, we're involved, and we're listening to different points of view. Yeah, thanks everyone. Have a very good night if you're in UK, Europe, and if you're in the USA, have a good evening. And going to go to our members page if I can move my mouse, and I'll see you all next time. See you next time.
You are watching Kyiv card. You are watching a Kyiv card. Is there excitement? Is there anger? Maybe curiosity? Well, just let us know your thoughts in the comments. Ask any question you might want to ask. Is there excitement? rushing in your veins, because you can't wait till the next one. Well then, check the description, and you'll find a link. You will find a link to Discord, a link to Discord. I know it may get difficult, things would seem dark, your mind frozen like a tree's bark, but that should stop us to thrive. Get to the top, win the gold, and the thrill won't stop, because this is Kyiv Card. Kyiv Card. You are watching a Kyiv Card. Is there excitement? Is there anger? Maybe curiosity? Well, just let us know your thoughts in the comments. Ask any questions you might want to ask, because this is a Kyiv Card. With the speed on show, now you're gonna know how to get fast like a dart, just like Kyiv Card. You are watching Kyiv Card. You are watching a Kyiv Card. You are watching Kyiv Card.